First of all, I would like to congratulate P.I. Jose sir for this masterwork on secularism, representation, totalitarianism, and its understanding, both evolutionarily and in the contemporary context. Uh, the major topics which are covered in this book that I would be talking about are totalitarianism, secularism, and representation, and a few judgments by the Supreme Court being a law student. First of all, India, or Bharat by whatever name we call it, it has been a unique cradle of the Indian civilization. Here the shikhars, the domes and the spires stand side by side. And the symphonies of the Azan and Aarti blend seamlessly with the Bible and the Gurbani. It is that tapestry of diversity and pluralism where a myriad of religions, cultures, languages, and traditions synchronize with one another. And like this book has beautifully highlighted, diversity of India is not merely a backdrop, it is the very quintessence of this nation. The contemporary socio-political scenario, however, is very concerning. There has been unwarranted and exponential rise in ostracization and exclusion of certain communities. Violence and persecution, be it at the hands of individuals or the state, has become so commonplace that sometimes I feel like death and defiance are becoming synonymous. What is even more alarming is that along with the dilution of religious and cultural pluralism, the argumentative and dialogic traditions of this country are also being compromised. The book we are discussing here begins with the term Hindutva, which is often used but seldom understood. As used in the contemporary context, it is not Indianness or even Hinduness. It has fundamentalism and fanatism at its heart. It is a particular political ideology which advocates for a totalitarian Hindu nation and defines the Indian civilization only in terms of the Hindu religious and cultural values. A nation which is defined solely in terms of one religion or one sectarian value or even one ideology by implication fosters hostility towards the other. The idea of considering the entire non-Hindu nation as being non-Indian or foreign, it is in conflict with the spirit of India and also the constitution which the people have given themselves. Hindutva ideologues have long been calling for a state religion, followed by ostracization and subordination of those who are not practitioners of that religion. At this juncture, I wish to quote one of the most respectable intellectuals of this country, Romila Thapar, who in her work The Secular Mode of India explained that secular does not deny religion, but at the same time does not give it primacy in the functioning of the society. It regards laws, social ethics, and moral codes as constituted by men and women in accordance with their needs. Laws are therefore not immutable and can be changed. Secular can be a form of release should religious laws become oppressive. I marvel at what Madam has said here, and given this premise, a state religion has the potential to be hazardous not just to the non-adherents of that religion but also to the adherents of that religion. The materialization of a very totalitarian and exclusionary government based on religion has begun to plague this nation, which was once built on very egalitarian ideals. A fascinating interpretation has been given of Hindutva in 1996 judgment, which Joycia ma'am spoke of. To add to that, in this case, which was the judgment was delivered in 1996, Dr. Ramesh Yashwant Prabhu versus Prabhakar Kashinath Kunte and another. While discussing how terms like Hindutva must be interpreted, the court held that speech is not to be construed in the manner in which it would be construed after an academic debate. How an ordinary man is going to construe certain terms is what our authorities have to keep in mind. And I do concur with the Supreme Court when it says that the use of these terms does not by itself imply an intention to instigate communal disharmony, but when these terms are used with violent fervor, with manipulative undertones, either to influence the vote bank, to incite violence, or to foster communal enmity are judicial, quasi-judicial, and administrative bodies must respond proactively. In the first quarter of 2024, the Election Commission issued a particular advisory to all the political parties to maintain decorum and utmost restraint in public campaigning and to raise the level of election campaigning to issue-based debate. It warned against making false statements and utterances. But blatant breach of the Model Code of Conduct was not met with any stringent measure. The existence of a utopia on paper becomes inconsequential when our authorities fail to stir legal machinery into action. As we are all aware, and as the panelists spoke of, our Indian Constitution, which is a manifestation of the Indian spirit, it guarantees our citizens the right to freedom of religion, equality, equal protection, and our preamble establishes sovereign, secular, democratic republic where justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity take precedence over what we call despotism. A democracy breeds on argument, dialogue, and most importantly, representation. And it won't be out of place to consider the issue of VVPAT slips. There have been a plethora of PIL, especially in the past decade, which have raised the issue of demanding 100% counting of VVPAT slips. It came to be considered in Subramaniam Swamy versus Election Commission of India in 2024 itself. Now, free, fair and transparent elections are indispensable to the sustenance of democracy, evidently. And the Supreme Court also said in Subramaniam Swamy versus Election Commission that vote is nothing but an act of expression which has immense importance in a democratic system. But in our 2024 judgment of Association for Democratic Reforms, the court ruled against 100% verification. It although considered all the technicalities which were involved in the EVM VVPAT mechanism, but it concluded that this mechanism was so sufficient that it did not require additional verification. Now, it is my considered view that neither humans nor technologies are infallible. And one of the tech grandees, Elon Musk, recently came to X, and in the context of EVMs, he said that the risk of being hacked by humans or AI, although small, is still too high. When the future of the nation for the next 5 years is at stake and implications of the acts done by representatives in the next decades also, every possible endeavor has to be made to ensure that voting and counting are transparent. Administrative inconvenience or delay is not a factor which should hold value when representation is in jeopardy. Although a complete return to the paper ballot system may not be viable, but 100% verification of VVPAT slips would ensure that whenever there is a discrepancy in the numbers arrived at through electronic counting and the numbers which are arrived at through physical counting of the slips, an investigation can be made at the polling booth or the constituency or maybe the assembly segment of the parliamentary constituency. The sanctity of the election process correlates with the sanctity and sustenance of the democracy. And I believe that every possible effort should be made towards ensuring that people's representatives are their true representatives. Before I conclude, I would like to emphasize that skepticism is not necessarily negative. Silence and unquestioned acceptance are the arch enemies of a democracy, and dialogue and discourse are its allies. The present erosion of sexual polity, transparency and dialogue needs to be questioned lest the democracy would be in shambles. Pluralism and pluralistic ethos is what breathes vitality into this nation, and if this pluralism is compromised, our democracy would suffocate to death. I would like to conclude by saying that. Thank you for this opportunity to be with such dignitaries and luminaries.